Today is Thursday, July 7th, 2022. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. Red flag laws failed in the case of the Highland Park shooting, and now we know why. We'll have the details on that and more on today's Quick Start podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. If you agree with that mission, you can help by subscribing to this podcast, give us a rating, share it with a friend, all that good stuff. Help us get through the news of the cray together. And with me, as always, getting through the news of the cray, Tré Goins-Phillips, Billy Hallowell from CBN's faithwire.com. Happy Friday, Junior, guys. What's going on?
We're almost there. We've almost made it.
Right? We're so close. And I love that we have people who listen to the pod who have already started saying Friday Junior for Thursday.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
This seems like a merchandise opportunity, merchandise line. Get a Friday Junior T-shirt, to wear on Thursdays. It'll be fantastic. But looking forward to your stories, guys. Marvel's latest movie. Who can keep track of them at this point? There's like 800 of them. Apparently, there is a lot of activism, we'll say, in that. We're going to dive into that. Plus, a 100-year-old veteran talks about the state of the country. We'll hear his words of wisdom coming up. And on the main thing today, the Supreme Court ruling that curbed the EPA's power to regulate carbon emissions. Climate activists are disappointed, but they're planning to hit back. We'll dive into what's ahead on that front. But our first thing today, let's go through some of the top headlines. Some crazy weather is on the way. 78 million Americans across 18 states are facing some dangerous heat and severe weather all the way through the rest of this week. The National Weather Service reports that temps could hit the upper 90s into the hundreds across several states: Kansas, Oklahoma, Missouri, Tennessee, Arkansas, etc. It's always hot in some of those places, but when you're looking at like the Northeast and such, it's been nice here. Speaking from the corner of the country that is Philadelphia, it's been beautiful up here lately. So the heat wave is on the way, probably in most places across the country, wherever you're at. UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson, he is in danger of being forced to resign. There's been a whole bunch of resignations in his administration after a series of things, but he apparently lied about a ministerial appointment and mishandled some allegations of sexual conduct by a colleague. He's vowing to stay in power. He is fighting back on a lot of these charges. So that is something that we're keeping an eye on over on cbnnews.com. Also, across the pond, a big life issue. The parents of Archie Battersby, they were really glad about the latest Court of Appeals judge who overturned the decision to remove their 12-year-old son from life support. There was a panel of 3 judges yesterday that said the case should be heard again after the high court judgment wrongly determined that the boy was dead. This is Billy and Tré and I, we covered the Charlie Gard story from years ago, where they just have some definitely different ways of looking at things over in the UK when it comes to life. And so we're monitoring that closely over on CBN as well, because a lot of times you can see a few steps ahead of what are the things you're going to see over here, and particularly in the wake of Roe. Those issues are become incredibly important. But also on cbnnews.com, Rep. Adam Kinzinger, his district not far from Highland Park, where that tragic shooting took place on July 4th. He spoke out about it, said we have a problem with the heart in this country. And he said, this is what happens, I guess, when you turn away from values, turn away from God. You can check out that interview on cbnnews.com. And that's where I want to stop down for a few minutes here and just talk about the Highland Park, the latest. The mass shooter, they're going to remain in jail without bond. And he has admitted now to investigators that he fired into the crowd, and the death toll went up to 7. It was at 6. Another victim passed away at the hospital yesterday. But the big question everyone is asking today is, how did this 21-year-old get the gun in the first place? There was a known history with police going back to as recently as 2019. There were some incidents, domestic disturbances, where family members reported him threatening himself, suicidal threats, reports of that, also threatening to, quote, kill everyone, was in the report. So his family reported him. Police did respond to that. They did also report that to state police as well. So he was on the police radar. So how did he manage to get his hands on a gun? Well, it comes down to his dad. That's the answer. Despite knowing all of these threats that had happened. The father of this gunman sponsored the son's firearm owner's identification card, that's the FOID, 2.5 years ago, despite these instances, as I said. And so the police, their response on that, they said the subject was under 21 and the application was sponsored by the subject's father. Therefore, at the time of the FOID application review in January of 2020, there was insufficient basis to establish a clear and present danger and deny the FOID application. So there you have it, guys. That is how people were wondering how these red flag laws failed. And Billy, this is one of those things that people point out with some of this gun control legislation. I know we've talked about it, but it seems like there's always some scenario where they're going to find a way around it.
Well, yeah, I mean, when your first response is we need more laws, you kind of have to take a step back and say, okay, whether or not that's true, what do we have on the books now, and are these laws working? I mean, here's the deal. I don't know every detail of this case. I think we're all still learning it. But even if a parent is, co-sponsoring or doing whatever they need to do, if there's something in the background, I think the big question is, why aren't all of these agencies able to communicate in a way where they would know that and they would say, well, we're still going to deny this because this is in this person's background. So clearly, whatever is on the books now is not either being enforced or it's not working, it seems.
Yeah, I think more often than not that ends up being the case is that laws aren't being adequately enforced, or even maybe there's some ignorance about what the laws already are, which all of that is only muddied when we have these incidents, these tragedies, and then we jump to create all of these new laws that may or may not actually end up being effective. I think we need to go back and see, okay, what laws are already there and how did we maybe poorly apply them or not apply them at all, instead of leaning on emotion, which I think is so often the case with, just our human nature, to jump to put something in place, some sort of law in place. And more often than not, they end up being kind of unsuccessful. There's room to give in both directions, but, I don't think jumping the gun because of our emotions is always ultimately effective.
Yeah, and it does seem like a lot of times I think you can get a lot of people to agree in general that, hey, if we can put some rules in place that will actually, stop some of these shootings, prevent people who shouldn't have guns from getting these guns in the first place. But I think the pushback comes because a lot of times these laws end up putting undue burden on law-abiding gun owners who do not pose a risk to greater society, and then they somehow still find a way around these loopholes like that. But we will keep you posted on cbnnews.com as more information comes in on this, because this issue is just going to keep happening as far as the discussion on gun control. It is going to keep going, and so we will have you covered there on cbnnews.com. But we're seeing some big changes in the countries, guys, and not everyone thinks a lot of those changes are a good thing, including one outspoken war veteran from I think World War II. And Billy, what did he have to say?
Yeah, this is Carl Sperlin Deckel. He's a U.S. Marine vet. He celebrated his 100th birthday, which is just incredible, on June 29th. And obviously, he was interviewed because not only did he turn 100, he's a World War II veteran. He's a hero. And he talked about a lot of different things in this local news interview. He talked about how God brought him home safely. He talked about being active in his church. And he was very positive until he got to this point of really talking about where the country is today. Before we even go there, he talked about how it was his honor to serve the country, how he would do it again. If he were the same age and this war were to happen again, he would have gone and done what he did. But he started to talk about culture, and he didn't go into very specific issues. But here's what he did talk about. He talked about gratitude, being grateful for what we have. And he said, quote, "Nowadays, I'm so upset at the things we did and the things we fought for and the boys that died for it. It's all gone down the drain. Our country's gone to you-know-where in a handbasket. We haven't got the country we had when I was raised. Not at all. Nobody will have the fun I had. Nobody will have the opportunity I had. It's just not the same, and it's not what our boys, not what they died for." And as he's saying this in his interview, this isn't just some angry comment. He starts breaking down and crying, and somebody has to almost come in and sort of console him. And he collects himself and he says, I'll be okay. I'll be okay. But his point was that people are always complaining. They're not grateful for what we have. And he just can't believe the things that are happening in this country. But he did say he's just going to keep on keeping on. He doesn't feel 100, even though he is 100. So a lot of positive, but I think some sobering. When you hear somebody say that, somebody who fought in World War II, watched people die, it makes you think.
Yeah, it really has to hit you different, Tré, when you know your blood, your friend's blood, you saw people die. He was one of the fortunate ones who was able to return. But when you see that firsthand, and then all these years later, maybe we didn't get exactly the specifics of the things that he's frustrated about, but all this division and the frustration at America, probably some of it. And you can imagine just having seen what he saw.
Yeah, I think it's easy when we live in such a blessed time as Americans. We have so much opportunity, and we have been so privileged in what we have available to us. It doesn't mean that there aren't instances of discrimination, or that there isn't, of course, wrongdoing and evil. We've seen these shootings over the last couple of months. There still is obviously a great deal of evil in this world because it's a fallen and broken world. But I think, unfortunately, because of the general blessing, and I know, like I said, I'm generalizing, but because of that, we kind of nitpick and we get into fights over things that don't really matter. Or we complain about things that are not really that big of a deal. And we end up really just kind of destroying ourselves from within because we have just taken advantage of the blessing that we've had for so long. We just assume it'll always be there. So we don't have to work at it, to work at keeping it and preserving it. So I think this message from this veteran is a good reminder that we have something great, but we've all got to work together to keep it and to protect it.
Yeah, it's true, because we live in a time where the threat of America just not really existing, changing, yes, but just going away. I mean, nobody knew. You didn't know what was going to happen after World War II or during World War II. So that certainly was not a given. And so to now we kind of get to bask in that peace and security and comfort of knowing, like, hey, this country is stable in the fact that it's not going to get toppled by some other country. So really incredible to hear the words in that perspective from a veteran such as that. And I mean, hey, I'd want to get his 2 cents on this next story, Tré, but I don't know how that would be interesting. But Marvel's out with about their 8,000th movie. I can't keep track of them. I like them, but I can't keep track of them all. But Natalie Portman kind of dished a little bit on some of the activism we might be seeing. And given the performance that some other movies have had that have dived into this, it could be an interesting one to watch how it does.
Yeah, it's frustrating as a Marvel fan or even kind of a Disney fan, anytime with any movie, it doesn't matter what the brand is, to see them kind of diving into activism, because it so often feels forced and ends up kind of distracting from the story. So that goes right into what we're talking about here. So this weekend, the Disney-owned MCU, Marvel Cinematic Universe, is slated to release its newest film, its 8,000th film, like you said, Dan, Thor: Love and Thunder, which is the 4th Thor movie. So there have been a lot, but according to 2 of the stars in the movie, it's filled with LGBT storylines. So Natalie Portman, she plays Jane Foster in the movie. She said the movie is, quote, so gay after being asked about it by reporters at a London event. And her co-star in the film's director, Taika Waititi, who voices Korg, interjected kind of jokingly and said that the movie is, quote, super gay. So Waititi's character is reportedly confirmed to be part of the LGBT community. During the movie, Korg alludes to his parents' alleged same-sex relationship, describing the way he was, quote, conceived by 2 males holding hands over molten lava. So, and he plugged in, which is Focus on the Family's outlet. They did note that it's possible that species doesn't even have females, so that might make some sense of it. But either way, Disney is kind of leaning into the same-sex thing here with that. The movie also shows another supporting character, Valkyrie, who's played by Tessa Thompson, coming out as part of the LGBT community. So it certainly is part of a push in this new movie, like it has been with several others. And this, of course, comes after Disney executives forecasted exactly this coming, that there were going to be more and more LGBT agendas in films. Lightyear, the movie that just came out, a Toy Story spinoff, which is geared toward kids, includes a same-sex kiss between two women. That movie didn't perform well for a number of reasons at the box office, but that's widely believed to be one of the reasons, among others, like I said. So after all, Disney CEO Bob Chapek did say in April that he wanted to be a, quote, better ally to the LGBT community. And Carrie Burke, the president of General Entertainment for Disney, said she wanted to see many LGBTQIA characters in Disney films and shows. So we all kind of saw this coming. And polling shows that Disney has already taken a favorability hit from 2021 to this year, presumably, at least in part, because of their commitment to this leftist ideology. We don't know if the tie is we're not convinced that is the sole tie, but that certainly seems to be one of them. So we'll see long term what kind of impact this has on Disney. But the early polling suggests that it might not be so good.
Well, yeah, and regardless of what the activism is, like you said, it does a lot of times feel forced. But I think, as Christians, parents, and a lot of people watch Marvel, and maybe it's time that we're gonna have to start, because most of it was just kind of space age type fun. That none of this stuff was in there, at least not a lot of it in the previous ones, at least in the Thor ones. And so now I think parents might have to start reconsidering that.
It is really interesting when you look at things sociologically and culturally, and you look at the critiques that a lot of Christians have been hit with over the years. Your faith isn't everything. You have to find a way to insert your faith and push it on us. It's really fascinating to sort of watch from just a factual basis how the same strategy that was accused of Christians is actually being integrated and used in much of media and Hollywood to drive home an evangelistic point on the other side on these issues, right? Because really, at the end of the day, these should be things that rally families around and people around. And I get there's a debate about representation and all of that, but the point is you don't really need to do this. These are choices that you make. And, to Disney's credit, I mean, I know they didn't want all those videos out. Some of those videos leaked out. They are doing what they said they were going to do. So this is not entirely shocking, and I think we're going to see a lot more of it probably.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to see a full test of the whole, because a lot of conservatives champion the phrase, go woke, go broke, after Lightyear sort of did not meet expectations by a long shot. So we'll see, because they're putting it in the face of Americans right now with the comments from Natalie Portman and elsewhere. So certainly something to watch on that front. All right, on to the main thing today, the Supreme Court ruling that curbed the EPA's power to regulate carbon emissions. That one did not get as much attention as some of the other big rulings. Obviously, Roe v. Wade stealing a lot of headlines there. Well, activists are definitely disappointed by this ruling, and we are going to see how they plan to respond. That's an issue we tackled here on The Main Thing. If you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook, make sure to go ahead and head on over to cbn.com/quickstartpodcast. You can subscribe to this podcast, catch the full episode of this episode and all the rest of the podcast coming your way.